Our year-long series of reports on Oklahoma's Black frontier towns continues this week with a trip to Summit in Muskogee County. Founded in the 1920s, it's actually one of the newer historic Black towns, and it owes its existence to a man from Texas. Reporter Steve Shaw joins us with a fascinating history of Summit, Oklahoma. Steve?
Rich, the story of the town of Summit in Muskogee County reads like other historic Black towns that sprang up around central and eastern Oklahoma in the early 1900s, largely because of agriculture.
This was the center of commerce of Summit as it was planned way back in the 1920s, early 30s.
77-year-old Dr. Wilbur Thomas is standing in front of a dilapidated building that used to be a business that decades ago was the town of Summit's only grocery store and the center of activity during Summit's golden years.
Down to my far left was the cotton gin, and then they had a livery stable where people could bring their livestock, for the horses to change and the machinery.
The town of Summit, 6 miles southwest of Muskogee, got its name from lore that it was the highest point between the Arkansas and North Canadian rivers on the Missouri-Kansas-Texas or MKT Railway. It ran parallel to town. In its glory, well over 1,000 people called Summit home. Now there's about 100. There used to be an MKT train station and Greyhound bus station next to the grocery store, and they had a post office too.
And, we talked about the cooperation between the residents of Summit. I used to have a bench right over there by the store, and for us that didn't have a car, we come down and sit on the bench and wait for a neighbor to come by and catch a ride to Muskogee with a neighbor.
Summit's story began in 1922 when Reverend L.W. Thomas, who'd made a fortune in oil down in Mahia, Texas, 310 miles to the south, arrived in July of that year. Thomas bought nearly 600 acres of land with a vision of transforming Summit into a proud all-Black town where Black Americans would flourish and be free of prejudice. Bonnie Thomas Carter is Reverend L.W. Thomas's granddaughter. She says her grandfather and other Blacks who'd struck oil around Mahia were actually forced to leave Texas.
And like I said, the story goes that, some of the whites did not like, all these Black guys, they being able to, drive these cars and have all this money and stuff. So they were basically run out of Mahia, run out of Texas. They had to leave he gathered up his family and had to leave in the middle of the night.
This is the home Reverend Thomas built and his family thrived in for generations, just up the hill from that old grocery store.
He wanted to create a thriving society for Blacks where they couldn't be run out or when we could sustain ourselves.
Skylar Carter is a PhD candidate and historian, and Bonnie Thomas Carter's daughter, which makes her Reverend L.W. Thomas's great-granddaughter.
He was an urban planner before we really, were using that term as a profession. He was really community-minded and also, the development of the community. He was really, really talented in getting that organized and, like I said, platting the community and bringing these businesses and knowing what the community needed to be self-sustaining.
The backbone of all Black towns in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and beyond was agriculture and hard work.
And that's something that didn't take a lot of money to start, growing crops and everything, and we knew how to do it and we're good at it.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Norma Jean Tucker was born in Summit in 1939.
Nobody was ever hungry. People had gardens. They shared with the other people, no matter how poor people were. They didn't even know they were poor. we always had enough to eat. And when anybody killed a cow or a calf or a hog, they shared with the neighbors.
Vernice Beasley Frazier was born there in 1942 to parents who embraced their challenges, which included 11 children.
11.
She had 11 kids?
11 kids.
And both your parents were deaf?
Yeah. Both of them were deaf mutes.
That speaks to the community.
Yeah. Yes, it does, because that comes in with everybody helping each other. Everybody looked out for your kids.
At 90 years young, Wallace Owens is the oldest living Summit native. For the past 18 years, he's operated Owens Art Place Museum in Guthrie. Wallace earned his art degree from Langston University after being discharged from the Korean War way back in the day.
Well, the secret to living a long life is get plenty of rest, eat well, do the right thing, and love your neighbors. Yeah.
In 1965, Summit native Glenn Gardner's aunt was the first black teacher in Muskogee Public Schools. He would go on to a long career as a teacher and administrator there as well.
I have two kids that they are grown now, but it seemed to me that our young folks coming up, they want to get something for nothing. It didn't work like that when I was coming up. You worked hard and you reaped the benefits of it.
Remember Wilbur Thomas? He knew something about hard work as well. Thomas graduated from Oklahoma State's Army ROTC program in 1968 with a degree in agriculture. Then, as a second lieutenant, was thrust into the Vietnam War.
Successfully, I didn't get hurt, got shot at a lot, didn't get hurt, lost my roommate that didn't come back. But, I feel blessed that I was able to survive it.
Dr. Thomas is an American hero and Muskogee County icon. After Vietnam, where he was awarded the Bronze Star and the Air Medal, Wilbur worked for many years for the United States Agency for International Development. He earned master's and doctoral degrees in international agriculture and worked in West Africa for another 2 decades. He's a former Langston University provost officer based in Tulsa. He also understands the key reason why all black towns like Summit eventually waned.
The large farms around the country kind of wiped out the smaller farmers. And so that's what happened to us in Summit in around the mid-50s to mid to late 50s.
Thomas and John Beasley grew up together.
One of my best friends. We came up from here. I was proud when he went to college, got a doctorate, got a master's, doctorate. Hey, I wasn't one of those people, but I was proud of the people that I grew up with that did accomplish those things.
Wilbur still plants a garden each year next to First Baptist Church in Summit.
I'll be starting next week. I'll start tilling. And then by mid-February, I'll plant the Irish potatoes, I'll plant onions, I'll plant mustard greens, collard greens, because those are cool season crops.
And he gives it all away. The circle of life. For several decades, one of the hubs of activity here in the town of Summit was St. Thomas Primitive Baptist Church. Reverend L.W. Thomas built the church just like he built the town 100 years ago. St. Thomas Primitive Baptist was one of 3 churches that thrived during Summit's heyday. After an earthquake 7 years ago, the building fell into disrepair. It's unsound and dangerous and has stood empty for 3 years. Michael Baker's older brother, Reverend Earl Baker, presided over St. Thomas Primitive Baptist for many years. Michael says this church was once the town's heartbeat.
After church, we'll get out of church and go grab our shotguns out of the cars and trucks and walk down there through the field and go rabbit hunting and for dinner. And whatever we killed, we took home and my mom cooked it, and that was our dinner meal.
Those were the days.
They're good days.
Baker says his brother has been dealing with serious health issues. For a while, church services were held in the kitchen next door, but that ended with the pandemic 3 years ago. A modest attempt at restoring the church began 2 years ago, until several months ago, Scott Reno heard about it.
I just felt led of the Lord to come to talk with him about it and come out and see what was going on, and I knew that I could help. I knew that I was supposed to help.
Reno is a 1974 graduate of John Marshall High School in Oklahoma City. He's a retired developer and golf pro, and he now leads the effort to restore the church.
Well, let me put it like this. The exterior walls are in great shape. Everything else needs to go.
I just want to know Summit is a nice place. The population has dwindled down, but like Scott said earlier, the church is the foundation. The foundation is cracked, which is the church, and I believe once the church gets going again, Summit itself will start to stride and become the Summit of old.
Do you ever see it coming back?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I believe it, I don't think that it will be in the same way that it was. But I think there can be a rehabilitation, a revelation of what could be.
Fundraising efforts are ongoing for the restoration of St. Thomas Primitive Baptist Church.